Step into the time machine. Let's travel through the past. Mr. Gold's gonna take you on a history blast. From ancient civilizations to the world wars. Get ready, hold tight, breathe.
Hey guys, in this video I'm going to give an overview of the US timeline for World War II. So in a previous video I talked about the causes of the war and the lead up to it. This is going to be more about the US's involvement. So to start off with, the US had a neutral stance at the beginning. They called it the Neutrality Act, which kept the U.S. from entering any foreign wars unless it was provoked. This didn't mean that the U.S. wasn't involved in any way at all. They were also lending and leasing weapons to the British, so they did have a little bit of involvement despite not sending in troops. This created tension between the U.S. and the Axis powers, especially Germany on the west, because Germany had submarines that were patrolling the waters, and they knew very well that the U.S. was sending supplies to Britain, and it created a tense situation where at any time the U.S. boats could be sunk, similar to World War I, where they were brought in by the sinking of the Lusitania. Also, Japan had tensions with the U.S. at this time, and the U.S. eventually will stop trading with Japan due to the tensions of the war and Japan being on the side of the Germans. So the reason that the U.S. does eventually enter the war with soldiers is because on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. During this attack, nearly 2,000 soldiers are killed in the sneak attack. It's a really interesting plan, the way Japan did it. They did an air attack from one side, and then they waited an hour and did an attack from the other side. So it was a very hectic situation. It sunk most of the U.S.'s Pacific Fleet. The one good thing is that the U.S. had its aircraft carriers on patrol, so the major aircraft carriers did not get destroyed. But it really weakened the U.S. in the Pacific, and it caused the U.S. to enter the war. And I'm not going to go into too much detail there because there's going to be another video on Pearl Harbor specifically. But this caused a war on two fronts when the U.S. enters in the Pacific. They were mainly fighting Germany in the west, and also in North Africa, and then Japan in the east. Some of the major battles here, we have the Battle of Midway, as you can see on the map, Midway Island, and then a series of island hopping battles that occurred in this red territory here. The main invasion of Italy happened in 1943, so in southern Europe from North Africa. And then you have the invasion of Normandy in 1944. The battle was called D-Day, and the whole operation was called Operation Overlord. It occurred on June 6th, 1944. They call it D-Day because when you're making secret plans, you don't want to write the time and the day that it's happening. So for example, if we wanted to plan like a surprise party, we would say, okay, the party's going to have all these balloons and cake and fireworks, and it's going to happen on D day and H hour. So the D just represents whatever day we choose, and the H hour represents whatever hour we would choose. So that way, if anyone ever finds out about the secret, they're not going to know the time specifically. So they just called it D-Day because they didn't want anyone to know the exact day that it would happen. The planning was done by Dwight D. Eisenhower, future president of the U.S. He was the supreme commander of the Allied forces during Operation Overlord. And the plan eventually led to the liberation of France from Germany, and then getting the Allies a place in the Western Front to attack Germany. So it saw the use of various technologies and tactics, including amphibious tanks, mulberry harbors, portable harbors that were developed and facilitated for offloading big cargo. And this battle is always viewed as the major turning point of the war because the Nazis had to fight from the west again instead of being able to just focus on the east. Over 150,000 troops took part in it. And immediately in the first day, 10,000 troops died because it was so difficult. As you can see in the picture here, there was a lot of German barricades to keep soldiers from running onto the beach and keep boats from landing on the beach. And they had a lot of machine gun nests in the hillside, so it was very hard to invade the beach. In the top right, you can see the portable harbors where the U.S. and the British each had their own pier. These long things are called piers, where they would unload their cargo onto the beach after they took it. Manhattan Project. So this was the project used to build the atomic bomb. It was a top secret project led by the United States to create a super weapon. They wanted to make the weapon that would end all weapons. The bomb was developed by nearly 130,000 people at its peak, including like scientists, engineers, test workers who would be like detonating test bombs, a lot of soldiers, and it costed $27 billion in today's money. The bomb will later be used, or two bombs are going to later be used against Japan to cause the surrender of Japan, but I'm not going to go into detail here about the nukes. That's going to come later. So 1945 was when the Manhattan Project was being used, but also in 1945, some of the crucial events. You have April 12th, 1945, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, dies due to a brain hemorrhage. They call it cerebral hemorrhage, where a blood vessel bursts in his brain, and it's usually due to high blood pressure. And if you know history, and you know Roosevelt's history in particular, you know why he might have had high blood pressure. He was president for 13 years during World War II and the Great Depression, so he had a lot of stress. He had polio, so he was confined to a wheelchair most of his adult life. So he wasn't really exercising a lot, and then the stress of the Great Depression and World War II finally did him in. And he dies the same month that Hitler dies, which is an interesting fact of World War II. And he's succeeded by President Harry S. Truman, who will be the one that ends up ending the war for the United States. Interesting fact about that month, Hitler is married to his longtime girlfriend on April 29th, and then April 30th, they both die by suicide. So it leads to some funny jokes about why their marriage only lasted one day, but really they just wanted to be married because they knew that the war was ending, and they wanted to die together. So interesting romance. But when I look at these pictures, like, the pictures tell the story. Like, just look at both of them, and that's one reason why I think it didn't last. But yeah, they died suicide in a bunker, April 30th, 1945. 7 days later, Germany surrenders the war, and they have a celebration known as VE Day all across Europe, Victory in Europe Day, marking the end of World War II in Europe. September 2nd, 1945, so about, what is the math, 4 months later, Japan surrenders the war after being nuked twice by the United States, and that's known as VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day, and that marks the official end of World War II. So I know we're flying through this stuff. I'm going to give another video about the Japan battlefront later on, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to move quickly. So the impact of World War II, the United States emerges as the global power followed by Russia, who was also considered a superpower coming out of World War II. And this leads to a period of economic prosperity for the United States and for Russia, because it's like, think of having a chaotic party at someone's house, and you attend the party. Their house gets destroyed from this chaotic party, but then you go back home and your house is perfectly fine, and you had your fun and didn't face the consequences. So that's sort of how the U.S. is. They were the factories for the war, and they were building a lot of the ammunition. But besides Pearl Harbor, nothing really happened on the U.S.'s home front. So the U.S. still has all its factories, all its railroads, all its roads, airfields, all that stuff. And so Europe's completely devastated, and they need help rebuilding. So the U.S. is going to be a leader in that rebuilding process. They institute the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine as a way to rebuild Europe. The Marshall Plan is just lending money to countries that need it, as long as they agree not to fall victim to communism and turn on the U.S. So the U.S. uses the loans as a way to keep Europe from being communist. And the Truman Doctrine is basically, we'll help you as long as the communism doesn't spread to your borders. So that's it for World War II. Oh yeah, I don't want to forget the United Nations, because that's still relevant today. One of the significant long-term effects of the war is that the United Nations is established as a way of having peace mediations. So if countries ever want to fight, they're supposed to come to the United Nations and talk about their issues and look for a peaceful solution, rather than just invading the neighbor country or the enemy country. So the United Nations is still around today. And in a future video, in the Cold War video, I'll talk about NATO and the Warsaw Pact alliances. But yeah, this is one of the lasting legacies. We still have it today and still use it to solve problems. So hopefully this video is helpful, and it gives you a timeline of the major events from the United States' perspective on World War II.
Step into the time machine. Let's travel through the past. Mr. Gold's gonna take you on a history blast.